As Mark Twain said, faith is believing what you know ain't so. This is Freethought Radio.
Welcome back to Freethought Radio. I'm Dan Barker.
I'm Laurie Gaylor. Most religions teach that we have a soul that connects to a supernatural world and survives death. Is that true?
Our guest today says no, and we are better off without a soul. David P. Barash is Professor Emeritus of Psychology at the University of Washington and a Fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. David Barash has written, co-authored, and edited more than 40 books, including Approaches to Peace, Economics as an Evolutionary Science, Understanding Violence, and Sociobiology and Behavior.
David Barash's newest book is called The Soul Delusion. David Barash is joining us from Goleta, California, where he lives with his wife, dogs, cats, and even a horse. Welcome to Freethought Radio.
Hi, thank you guys. Boy, after that introduction, I can hardly wait to hear what it is I'm going to say.
Well, we can't either. I read your book, as you know, and I found it fascinating. I mean, my soul was stirred as I read the book, or my non-soul, I guess. But before we talk about whether we have a soul or not, what are we actually talking about? What do people think a soul is?
Well, interestingly, that's a very loaded question, as you might expect. There are any number of perceptions what a soul is. And part of the problem is we really have no idea. Different people, obviously, different religions have entirely different, well, they're not entirely different. I'll take that back. There are some areas of agreement, if you will, among most of at least the Abrahamic religions, the big three, which is that the soul is immaterial, which is a strange statement in itself, to say that something is immaterial. Now, we have all sorts of ideas of things that are immaterial, and we agree, like love, kindness, anger. These are all immaterial. But the soul, by contrast, is supposed to be in some weird way real, material, and yet immaterial. Supposed to be real in that, again, most of the world's religions agree, or at least converge, on the notion that the soul goes somewhere after we die. It may go to heaven, it may go to hell, but it's going somewhere. Now, for something to be going somewhere, presumably it exists beyond love or hate or beauty. So, although it's immaterial, it's supposed to be somehow material as well. And that peculiar duality, if you will, makes the soul, if almost unique, maybe in fact unique among the world's belief systems. I want to add, by the way, that the fact that there is this convergence in some respects with regard to what the soul is, I really think does not give any further credence to the notion that the soul is a genuine concept. I mean, there's been universal or close to universal agreement about all sorts of things, like the fact that the Earth is flat. That simply isn't true. So the fact of convergence is not in itself, I think, an argument for something's existence.
But isn't it kind of an intuitive thing to most of us that I have a body, but something is telling me to move my hands. Something is telling me to make Isn't there an illusion like there is something inside of me that's separate from my body that's directing my body?
Absolutely. And I think that's a big part of the rather widespread belief in the soul. The notion that we do tend to make a distinction between our bodies and our minds. And for many people, mind becomes equivalent to soul. That is to say, as you said, Dan, what is it that makes me move my pinky finger if I elect to do so? Now, neurobiologists know quite well what that is. Uh-huh. It has to do with the actions of neurons, obviously, and electrochemical impulses across these nerves. Nonetheless, what's behind that? And we don't know. And to be perfectly honest, neurobiologists, although they've researched how the brain works, have yet to answer that really confounding problem, what has been called the hard problem of consciousness. And we don't have an answer to that. And I think it's not a violation of science to say we don't have an answer to what goes on in our consciousness when we think about something, when we tell our finger to move, when we perceive the color blue. That's what science is all about. We take unknowns and we try to figure out what's behind them. But to say, well, it's my soul, is the same thing as saying we don't know what the hell it is, but we're going to accept that it's there and that it's a result of God. Now that's, to some people, I suppose that's an acceptable answer. Sure as hell it isn't an acceptable answer to me, or I think to any legitimate scientist. To say, well, it's our soul that's responsible, is essentially a way of saying, well, we're not going to look into this anymore. It's magic. And I think a really important, I don't know if I made you laugh, Annie.
No, I was suppressing the sneeze. Sorry about that.
Her soul
I
was.
thought maybe, it was magic.
And people used to think their soul went out when they sneezed, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot, and that's why there's a tradition, at least in the Western world, people saying "God bless you," because of a worry that many people have had historically that when you sneeze, your soul leaves your body, making your body then vulnerable to be invaded by some sort of evil woo-woo spirit. So I hope you're okay.
I think I'm okay, but I have to.
God bless you.
I have to know, but I have to tell you that in our family, there was an Irish woman who was very instrumental in bringing up my mother. And when someone would sneeze, when my mother would sneeze as a little girl, she would say, "Bless the child if she isn't a witch." I think it was a joke.
I would like to think so.
So what is the danger in believing in a soul?
Well, at some level, I'm perfectly happy with the idea of a soul as something. People use the term metaphorically. I mean, something that I feel deeply, okay? That, in my soul, I believe, blah, blah, blah. That's different, I think, from the theological belief in the soul. And I think and that's what you were asking about. I think there are a number of real downsides here. And that may surprise people because many people think, well, it's an innocent belief. You want to believe in your soul, fine. You think you have a soul? Okay. There are some real problems here. One of them is that religions, certainly not all religions, but many, certainly Christianity and Islam, have grabbed the idea of the soul as a way of manipulating human behavior and causing an enormous amount of fear that when people die, if they haven't behaved in a way that is, or in ways that are required by their religious beliefs, their souls are going to be punished forever, for eternity. All sorts of horrible things are going to happen to you forever. And when it's happening to you, who's it happening to? What's it happening to? Well, it's happening not to your body, well, to your body too, actually, in many of these beliefs. Your body will suffer the torments, all sorts of torments. But another way of looking at it, of course, that's related is your soul will, because that's what presumably will, quote, live on after your death, which is an interesting oxymoron, that any part of you will live after you've died. But there is that incredibly dangerous, hurtful fear that I've never had. I grew up in a non-believing, an atheist household, but I had a number of Catholic friends, many of whom who even after they have graduated from their belief, are still oppressed by this anxiety that was really imprinted on them when they were young, and a horrible fear. So there's that. The whole issue of hell. There are a number of other things. For instance, many interesting problems. There's a very practical one having to do with politics and basic health. That is to say, if you maintain that there is a soul, and as Christianity essentially does, that the soul, then the question arises, when is this soul produced? Or when is it installed in a human body? Because there has to be some time when this happens. And the usual argument, the standard argument, is that the process of what's called ensoulment happens at the moment of fertilization. Now, as a biologist, I can say, and we can go into this as a sidebar, there is no moment of fertilization.
No.
Fertilization is an extended process that takes a very long time when the genetic contribution from the male and the female combine, although even then they don't really totally combine. The chromosomes from the father and chromosomes from the mother remain separate. Nonetheless, there is this notion of ensoulment. Now, if a soul is produced at the moment of fertilization, it's really important to realize that that is really the fundamental underpinnings of opposition to abortion.
Yes.
Because if a fertilized egg has a soul, then getting rid of that fertilized egg, it's a one-cell thing. And then it becomes 2, and then 4, and then 8. And if that has a soul, then the end of that zygote's early embryo's life is murder.
Right.
It's death of a living, ensouled being.
Well, you're
So
just sending it off to heaven, really. So we have to take a break, David. There's so much to talk about in your book. After the break, I want to ask you about near-death experiences. We're talking with Professor David Barash. He's the author of the new book, The Soul Delusion. We'll be right back with more Freethought Radio.
Hi, I'm Scott Nickelbein, FFRF's Director of IT, and I'm here in the studio to give you a first look at FFRF's newest media venture, Freethought TV. Freethought TV is a streaming service for your smart TV, streaming stick, or smartphone that lets you watch the latest FFRF programs whenever you want, free of charge. Freethought TV also gives you access to hundreds of programs we've produced right here over the years, including the most popular FFRF videos of all time. Freethought TV is easy to install. Just go to the App Store on your device and search for Freethought TV. Follow the on-screen instructions to install the app, and you're ready to start enjoying the best in secular programming right from the comfort of your living room. You can watch complete seasons of FFRF classics like Freethought Matters and Ask an Atheist. Plus, you'll get instant access to a powerhouse lineup of original shows, including candid interviews with celebrities, lawmakers, and secular activists, inspiring talks by best-selling authors and leading journalists, dynamic appearances by social media celebrities, legal insights from FFRF's expert attorneys, and laugh-out-loud comedy and wonderful musical performances. And of course, unforgettable speeches from FFRF's national conventions. There's a search function so you can find any episode instantly. And if you sign up for a free personal account, you get access to even more features. Freethought TV. It's free content for free minds.
Margaret Sanger's motto was, "No gods, no masters." This is Freethought Radio.
Welcome back. I'm Laurie Gaylor.
And I'm Dan Barker, and we're continuing our conversation with David P. Barash, author of the new book, The Soul Delusion, in which he writes on page 1, "In the universe of underexamined crackpot ideas, the soul is due for a takedown." So, David, you told us about the downside of people believing in a soul, and there's more to it than that, which people can read in your book. But you also say that we're better off without it. There's actually an upside to abandoning the idea of a soul. How do you say that?
Well, there are a number of benefits here. I should mention a number of people are fearful. What would it mean if I give up the idea of me having a soul? I mean, one worry is that somehow there will be an open season on the most unethical, immoral behaviors imaginable, that we'll all become a bunch of zombies. Well, if that's true, then I would be a zombie because I don't believe in a soul. And there are a lot of zombies walking around. Of course,
Yeah, there sure are.
Yeah, well, there are a bunch of zombies walking around. We can identify them, but it's not because they do lack a soul in the way most people speak of it, sort of soulless behavior. But the reality is, if we don't have a soul, believing in it or not isn't going to make any difference. Or if we have a soul, believing in it is not going to make any difference in reality. But you asked a really good question, Dan, which is what are some of the obvious upsides, or maybe less than obvious upsides of going beyond belief in a soul? I mean, one of them that many people don't think about is, as a result of the widespread belief in a soul, there's a notion that human beings have one and other animals don't. And as a result, this has been marching orders for many, particularly in Islamic and Christian traditions, of horrible behavior toward animals. Because we have a soul and they don't. If we give up that notion and stop deluding ourselves, I think we'd be much more likely to treat animals better than we do now. Beyond that, there is also the issue that by going beyond the fear of hell or the hope of heaven, we are freed up by acknowledging that we are what we are. The real world out there is what we've got. I forget the name of the poet who wrote, well, what will you do with your wild and wonderful life? Well, if you recognize that your wild and wonderful life is what you've got now, here and now, right there, instead of worrying about the future or hoping about a future that is a future after death, that is, frankly, I hate to tell you this, not going to happen. We're freed up then to appreciating, understanding, enjoying, reveling in our life as it is right now. I end my book, The Soul Delusion, with modifying a quote from Martin Luther King Jr., where he says in one of his more famous speeches, free at last, thank God I'm free at last. Well, I would modify that and say, free at last, thank reality, we are soulless at last.
Wow, amazing. Your book, as you say, does a takedown of the idea of the soul, and you have a lot of chapters in there about dualism. But what would you say to people who insist that there has to be something immaterial because of all of these reports of near-death experiences?
Well, there have been a number of these reports, and I can give you the references, but basically all of the ones that have been investigated seriously have frankly been debunked. The reality is that when a brain, is under severe stress, which often involves a lack of oxygen, an avalanche of all sorts of neurochemicals associated with severe stress, the brain goes through all sorts of contortions and provides the sufferer, the dyer, the near dyer, with any number of perceptions that are not that different from what one gets under as a result of the use of psychedelic drugs, for instance, sleep deprivation. All sorts of things will cause our brains to give us any number of perceptions. Again, this gets into the issue of dualism as well that you raised, Dan, which is I think, totally unfounded belief that there are two worlds. There's the natural world and the supernatural. And I think any scientist worth their salt will maintain that there is only one world, the natural world. But as a result of the things that our brain does, we can have any number of perceptions that seem real. And yet once we are, quote, back in our right mind, which is to say once our brain is functioning appropriately and correctly, at least if it's a result of a drug-induced experience, we say, hey, wait a minute, I realize that there's a real difference here. When it comes to these so-called near-death experiences, I think an important factor that doesn't receive enough attention is the incredible credulity that so many people have. So many people are desperate to believe that they have a soul and that when they die, this soul will do all sorts of things, float above their bodies, etc. Interestingly, the soul is always floating above the body. It's never down on the hospital floor crawling around. And why it leaves the body? Why it leaves the body is an interesting question. Is the soul misled into thinking that this body is going to die? Because remember, these near-death experiences don't actually result in death. So the soul leaves, floats around, and then, I don't know, maybe is disappointed when it turns out that the body is not going to die. And so it has to re-enter the body, which in so many religious traditions, especially again in Christianity, I might add, is seen as somehow dirty, foul, less valuable in an odd way, less real than the soul itself. So the soul, maybe having thought that it was going to be emancipated and go to heaven, turns out, oh, damn, I got to go back into this body.
You write that evolution devastates dualism. Why does it?
Well, because evolution teaches us that there is, in fact, a profound continuity amongst all living things, including our biology, including how neurons work. And so the notion that human beings are possessed of something that is qualitatively different from other living things. Any honest look at evolution will essentially convince us that that's nonsense.
Well, thank you so much, David, for being with us today. There's a lot more to say about the soul and the takedown of the soul, which viewers and listeners can find in your new book, The Soul Delusion. It's been really a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, guys. Back at you. I've enjoyed it. My soul resonates with you.
And that's our show for today. And we'd appreciate it if you are not a member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation to join us in our work so that reason and our secular constitution will prevail at FFRF.org.